Hello and welcome to JumpChat. I am your Patreon podcast host, Rhys, and I'm joined today by Neil Vagg from Get Your Comic On. Hello, Neil. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. I'm well excited to talk about Black Widow because we're two very fortunate people that we got to see it early, thanks to the people at Disney Plus, I guess, who let us see it a few days early to get our reviews in. So I thought we'd talk about Black Widow today and get some early thoughts in on what we think of the film and some spoiler chat and some kind of thoughts on Black Widow compared to the rest of the MCU. So let's go spoiler free first of all, and then I'll do a big spoiler warning at some point. But why not give us your initial thoughts on Black Widow without spoilers, please?
So I think I'm one of those people who had reached the point where I'd had like my major hype for Black Widow, and then COVID happened, and it just went to the back of my mind, and it felt like we were never going to see it. So I think I'd lost a little bit of my anticipation for it, but I really enjoyed this film. I was so happy at the end of it that Natasha got this story all to herself, that finally filled in some of the blanks and was what I felt like the character deserved. So there were a few bits which I think could have been better, but overall I came out of that film really, really happy.
Did you have any particular kind of favourite kind of characters or moments that really stuck out to you?
I thought Yelena was excellent. Florence Pugh really gave Scarlett Johansson a run for her money, in my opinion. I don't know what my anticipation was for that character and what the relationship between the two of them was going to be like, but it was more than expectation could have ever have been. It was funny, but I really felt like there was a sisterly bond between them. It felt like they probably got on really well outside of filming as well. So you could really feel that rapport between them. So I loved anything that involved Yelena. She was great, and I'm really excited to see where the MCU could take her in the future. I think favourite moments, maybe the car chase. I thought the action in this film was some of the best kind of, I don't want to put it, sort of street level hand-to-hand combat. You know, it was very, I don't want to say it was John Wick because it's not quite that, but you know, it's closer to that kind of film than a Marvel film would kind of generically be. So I was really impressed by the level of combat that we had in this film. It felt really befitting of the character.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I said kind of in my review that I really liked the street level hand-to-hand combat because it had a bit of a kind of a Jason Bourne Identity kind of vibe to it. It was a bit more kind of grungy, and particularly there's a really, really cool fight scene in the apartment where Yelena and Natasha are just throwing each other around the apartment, and just it feels like they're getting actually hurt, you know, which isn't always the case in a Marvel film. Yeah,
exactly. You are right. Bourne is a great analogy for it.
Yeah.
That's one I hadn't thought of, but I did sort of say in our podcast that I felt like it was a good espionage thriller from Marvel.
Yeah, it was. And I think that's where the film was properly at its best for me, was when it was, you know, dealing with the espionage side of it and being a bit more ground level, which is where kind of Natasha has always excelled in the series. And then now you've got Yelena, who is a very similar operator, I guess, but with lots of her own different quirks. I think she would do things that Natasha wouldn't do, potentially. She's a bit more gung-ho, bit more of a wild card compared to Natasha. So I agree with you, what you said about Florence Pugh, that she was by far the best element of Black Widow, the film. Even though there were lots of good elements to it, she is, I think, widely considered the best kind of new inclusion into the MCU from this film.
Yeah, definitely. People are going to be talking about her for a long time after this.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Especially after a certain scene towards the end, which we'll get to later on. But I wanted to kind of do a quick spoiler warning at this point, so we'll dive into some of the major moments to it. So if you haven't seen Black Widow yet, you can switch off this episode now, head off to your cinema because it's out, I think, today, as of time of posting, in the UK anyway, and then come back and listen to our spoiler-filled chat shortly. But now they're all gone. I don't think there's that much to spoil in Black Widow, very weirdly. It's not as major. It's not as major a film as, for example, say Endgame or Infinity War was. You know, it's all very small and self-contained, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. I could not agree with you more on that one. It's funny because I I did hear from a few people who were at the fan events who had seen it a little while before you and I did. Mm-hmm. And somebody had said to me that there was what they refer to as a major spoiler in the opening credits, and that they wished they'd known beforehand about it because they felt like it having whoever it was, they didn't tell me who it was, having this person's name in the opening credits had ruined the fact that they were then in the film, so they felt like either Marvel should have been up front and said you're in it, or not put them in the credits. And then when I watched it, I thought, hang on a minute, I'm pretty sure everyone named here has at least been glimpsed in a trailer. So that I found quite interesting.
Well, I was struggling to think who that character was. But is it Olga Kurylenko that you're referring to?
It could be. I thought maybe it was William Hurt. But then...
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He was in a trailer. He was in the first trailer. I'm sure we saw a brief shot of General Ross in one of the trailers.
That rings a bell to me as well. Because I was thinking... When it came up that William Hurt was in it, I thought, oh, General Ross is back. I thought he was quite a natural connection to the MCU for him to be in this film.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think Olga Kurylenko, if I say your name wrong, I do apologise.
No, I think you're spot on there.
Well, thanks. Was the spoiler, if there is a spoiler, because she is, of course, revealed to be the Taskmaster. And I was very wrong in my initial prediction for months when we saw the first trailer. I thought Rachel Weisz was going to be Taskmaster.
Yeah, me too.
It seemed like all the signs were pointing towards that. But then the reveal that it's her, it's Ray Winston's Dreykov's assumed dead daughter is Taskmaster was a very odd choice.
Very.
And I think it wasn't quite the surprise reveal that it was intended to be.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was...
And it's a shame, really.
Yeah, it was a very strange moment when that happened. Like you, I've spent months saying to people, it's a Marvel film, of course it's going to be Rachel Weisz. Who else would it be? She's in this. She's going to have to be evil at some point, and she's probably going to be Taskmaster. And then I felt like, and I don't know about you, but I think I figured it out when we flashed back to Budapest.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the moment when I said
the explosion. I guess.
Yep, I said to my other half, that's it. That presumed dead daughter is going to be Taskmaster.
Okay. I didn't call it. I will say that. I didn't predict that it would be her. I was expecting some kind of surprise reveal. However, when it did happen, I thought, oh, it was a bit underwhelming of a reveal for me.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then even saying that, I think Taskmaster, like herself as a character, was very underused and underwhelming throughout the entire film. I think their initial appearance when they destroy Natasha's car, and there's that really cool fight scene on the bridge.
It was a great fight scene.
Where they try and steal the... Really, really cool fight scene. Really well shot, and you could see there were lots of the kind of elements of the other Avengers that they'd been mimicking over their kind of training period. They were really cool to see. And yet, from that point, you didn't really get much more Taskmaster.
No,
it was just very limited.
It was, wasn't it? And I do feel like the trailers had overhyped that in a way. I did feel like Taskmaster was going to be the big antagonist of the whole thing, and it did. Yeah, that it went from that amazing fight scene to really fading into the background, which I think also took away from the reveal as well, because it wasn't built up at all, really. No. It was just very matter of fact, like, Taskmaster's here, kind of going to dip out, we'll dip back later, oh, by the way, happens to be Dreykov's daughter. Yeah.
Yeah. It was very strange, and it felt like Natasha...
How did you feel
never
about...
really interacted with Taskmaster. Sorry, you carry on.
No! Sorry, I was just going to say, what did you think... just because it's in my mind after recording our podcast, what did you think of Ray Winston's accent?
It was a choice that he made.
I felt like it was Russia via East End London.
Yeah, I'm not sure Ray Winston is the most gifted vocal actor, shall we say. I think he's a very fine talent, and he's very good at what he does really, really well.
Absolutely.
But I think playing a Russian henchman doesn't really suit him. Or a Russian mob boss, I guess. But I thought he was perfectly fine. He was perfectly evil. He was perfectly evil in kind of his scene with Natasha, and I liked the
definitely
the twist of her having the fake mask on that we've seen in Winter Soldier. I thought it was quite nice and a good callback. But yeah, I think he also wasn't used enough. The villains in this film felt a bit underbaked.
Oh, sorry, you broke up for a second there. I lost you.
Oh, apologies. It's okay. You're back. I just think they were a bit underbaked. But anyway, moving on.
Yes, definitely.
We both said that we really enjoyed the ground level action that Black Widow had, and yet in the final acts, the film definitely goes much more into the Marvel territory that we're used to, with a big, massive thing in the sky to take down, and they end up fighting through the sky. And I'm thinking, you've kind of lost your way a bit here, Black Widow. It's not. It didn't have the same oomph as the first kind of, I would say, hour and a half had, where it was much more grounded in realism, and it was a bit more realistic that Black Widow could get involved in this. Whereas in the last half an hour, she ends up flying through the sky. I'm thinking, come on, you're not quite this character, are you, Natasha?
It very much was that typical Marvel thing where it feels like they have to throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at the third act.
Yes.
And I was disappointed that they did that, but I can understand why they would do it, because it's obviously what they see as one of their strongest selling points.
Mm-hmm.
I really did not see it coming that the Red Room was going to be a giant floating, whatever it was, something somewhere between like a space station and a floating palace or some kind of odd structure.
Very bizarre. It was very kind of James Bond in that regard. I think it got very Dr. No towards the end.
Yeah, it did. But at the same time, I still really enjoyed it. So as much as I felt like it was a bit generic Marvel from that respect, like, oh, here comes let's throw all the VFX in the third act. It was still enjoyable, and it wasn't sort of the comparison. Whenever I've spoken to people about it over the last couple of days, has been, did it kind of go Black Panther in terms of that incredibly CGI, really obvious third act, and it didn't do that for me.
No, it didn't for me either. I think, like you mentioned it in our kind of Twitter DM the other day about the CGI, and I think the CGI is actually very impressive. I am waiting to see it on the big screen, because I think it will look very different compared to my
I think it will as well. I do think
TV.
We were given quite a sort of constrained version that did feel a little bit like a DVD rip from sort of 2001.
It did, and it doesn't help having your name plastered across the front of it, just to say, this is your copy, you must not steal it.
I know, it's one of the things that comes with the territory, unfortunately. You sort of get used to it.
It is. But I think it did. I feel like I'm being overly negative. I think I did ultimately enjoy it. I had a fun time. I just have a few reservations on it compared to other MCU films.
I would agree with you
I want to bring up the massive spoiler, I suppose, is the post-credit scene, which did have a nice surprise in it, in that I did not expect to see Valentina back from the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because I think had this film come out in its original release date, that would have been before Falcon, is that right? Or was this added in afterwards? I'm not entirely sure.
So my understanding of it is that she was cast by the Black Widow team. This was the first thing that she shot for the MCU, and so this would have been our introduction, and we would have kind of walked out of Black Widow thinking, Valentina, is that who I think it is? But then because of COVID and everything else that's happened, it's ended up flipped on its head, so her introductions ended up being in Falcon. I'm glad they left this in, though. I was worried that they might have taken her out, and I don't know why, I didn't think in my head that she would be a post-credit stinger. I thought she would have been a kind of lurking background character who we might have seen a couple of times throughout the film. So I was surprised when her name wasn't in the opening credits. I had expected to see Julia Louis-Dreyfus in the credits, and was surprised that she wasn't. But yeah, what a scene. Great scene.
It's really cool, and it sets up quite a lot, and I think it does kind of confirm the Thunderbolts in a way.
Yes. It does seem to.
Which is very exciting. And I think I'm actually glad that I saw her in Falcon first. I think it was when she popped up here, I thought, oh, I know who that character is.
Yeah.
Because my comic book knowledge is not that good. I I watch the MCU and I've not read any of the comics. I'm purely based on the products that they give me as a Disney company.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you knew that because you're a big comic book fan. But I thought it was quite a cool reveal for us.
No, I would agree with you. I think I've read a few comics that has this particular character in, but I have to say my biggest exposure so far is Falcon as well. So I actually think this has worked out really well for them because exactly as you've just reacted to it there, she comes into that shot and you're like, oh, I know who she is. She is not a good person.
Yeah,
this is not going to go well.
Are we thinking that, so moving forward, Yelena is going to maybe meet up with John Walker in some regard? Are they going to
I presume so, yeah.
Of the Thunderbolts?
Yeah. I mean, we know that she's confirmed for an appearance in Hawkeye. That had been... I don't think it's been put out officially by... It might have been by Disney, but certainly it's either like the worst kept secret of Hawkeye or Disney has confirmed at some point that Florence Pugh was going to be in it, but obviously we didn't understand what role Yelena would have in it. I, probably like a lot of people, presumed that Clint would maybe end up meeting up with her and they would kind of share their grief over the loss of Natasha, but now we know that when they first meet, it's going to be a case of she's on his trail rather than looking to make friends. Yeah,
absolutely. Oh, it does set up quite a lot for the future, which is quite nice. I'm glad that the Stinger was kind of in a post-Endgame world compared to the rest of the film, which was a nice kind of touch. So it does definitely link to Phase 4. But I guess we'll stop the spoilers there. Nice spoiler chat there, though, Neil. I really enjoyed that. Just to finish off our Jump Chat today, I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on where you think Black Widow ranks, I suppose, relative to the rest of the MCU. I don't want a specific position. Maybe you compare it. In your opinion, where is the standard of this film compared to the MCU we've seen so far?
That's a really good question. And actually, I haven't put any thought to that yet. But I think, for me, this has got to be... I actually think this would be top 5 for me.
Top 5? Wow.
I really enjoyed that whole street-level espionage aspect to it. I love that kind of film. I love a Bond film. And I felt like this did take a lot of the really good aspects from that and still kept some of the best aspects of Marvel at the same time. Okay, as we said, the third act maybe does go a bit big, but most of it worked. So yeah, I am genuinely really excited by this, and I can't wait to see it again. So I think it's going to be high up there for me. I'm trying to think where I would kind of compare it to. I'm a little bit controversial in my Marvel taste because I tend to lean more towards the sort of Civil Wars. Not Civil War. I mean, Civil War is a great film. Winter Soldier is what I'm thinking of. And I did feel like this was...
That's my favourite of all time of the MCU, so that's my absolute favourite.
You have good taste. You have very good taste. I felt like this is very much related to Falcon and to Winter Soldier than it is more so to maybe Civil War or, the more comedic end of the scale with Marvel, which I tend to relate to the comedic ones less. So something like Thor Ragnarok is really low down my list of preference just because I don't tend to go for the cartoonish humour. I prefer the more grounded aspects. So I would definitely say if you're a fan of Winter Soldier and if you enjoyed Falcon and Winter Soldier as well, then you're gonna really enjoy this film.
That's a very, very fair assessment. I think for me, I have it kind of in the same realm as a film like Ant-Man, which I really enjoy Ant-Man. I think it's very good fun, but I think it's one of the more, I guess, inconsequential entries in the MCU.
Yeah, that's fair.
In that it's a good expansion of the character, but it doesn't add much to the overall story of the franchise, I guess.
I would agree with you on that. That's true. I mean, it doesn't have a huge bearing on it. There was one small detail which I didn't pick up on first watch, which was slightly embarrassing, and then I had to Google it to confirm that my suspicion was correct, which was about Yelena's first ever piece of clothing that she had bought for herself.
Yeah, I didn't get this reference at all.
So Black Widow's wearing it in her entrance scene in Infinity War. It is...
No!
Yes, I know. I had to Google it because I thought, hang on a minute, this is tweaking something in the back of my mind. But if you go and look at Infinity War and you see the fight scene in Edinburgh Waverley train station, when she steps out of the shadows, she is wearing Yelena's vest.
Oh, that's so good. I didn't realise that at all.
I don't know what it was. It was when I watched it the second time. I thought, I mean, there's the whole scene where Yelena sort of says, "This is the first thing I've ever bought for myself," and it's like a nice analogy for her taking her identity back from the widows. But something about it, I thought, hang on a minute, we're paying a little bit too much attention here. There's got to be something about this, and the fact that obviously, again, sorry, we've veered slightly into spoiler territory, but that Natasha has her Infinity War hair at the end and was wearing it. I thought, just hang on a minute, I need to confirm something here, and she is wearing it in Infinity War.
Oh, that's a lovely realization. I didn't clock that. I knew there was something about the jacket because they mentioned it once or twice and said, "Oh, you have this." I thought that's got to be something, but I didn't realize what that was. Oh, that's fun. I really like that.
Yeah, it's a nice little way to tie it together, right? It's a really nice piece of sort of connective tissue between the films.
It is. That's a lovely kind of note to end on. I think I've learnt something new today. I didn't expect to about Black Widow, but thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm full of useless information.
I mean, that wasn't useless. I love that. That's kind of mini blown my mind, so I'm very pleased I learnt that. So I want to say thank you to Neil for joining me. Neil, where can we find you online? What do you do? Would you like to plug anything of yours?
Okay, so you can catch me on our fortnightly podcast. It's just the Get Your Comic On podcast. We're on all major platforms. And if you would like to read my rantings on other films that we don't have time to podcast about, you can find it all on www.getyourcomiccon.co.uk. I'm on social media at Neil Vagg, and we're on social media as a group just at Get Your Comic Con on all major platforms.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for joining me. I have been Rhys. I am on Twitter at @RuhButcher, and there's hopefully going to be plenty more of these jump chats to come over the coming few weeks. Once again, thank you, Neil. I hope you enjoyed our podcast, our mini podcast, I suppose, and hopefully you enjoy Black Widow. Thank you, and see you next time.